a gun pressed against my wife's temple, right on our front porch, as neighbors watched in stunned silence. Derek, our self-proclaimed neighborhood cop, sneered, all because we wouldn't tear down our fence. In that heartbeat, I knew this wasn't about a fence. It was about control, and Sarah, my wife, was hiding a secret that could bring him down. It was a sunny afternoon in Oakwood Heights, the kind of day where the light hits just right, and you can almost forget the world's chaos. But that day, Derek Morrison decided to cross a line that would change everything. Picture this. He's standing on my front porch, bold as brass, pointing a gun at my wife Sarah, right in front of the whole neighborhood. No hesitation, no valid reason, just pure intimidation. And why? All because Sarah wouldn't tear down our fence. Yeah, a fence. The one Derek, the self-anointed king of neighborhood security, decided was an affront to his ego. This guy strutted around in a uniform he probably ordered off some sketchy website, acting like he owned the law itself. I used to think scenes like this were reserved for Hollywood blockbusters, but there we were. Sarah with her hands tied behind her back, helpless, and me feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath us. In that moment, something snapped inside me. Derek had gone too far, and the silence he shattered would cost him. His fake badge and inflated sense of power were about to crash headfirst into reality. Let me take you back a couple of years. Sarah and I were done with the city grind, honking horns, endless traffic, the whole rat race. So we packed up and moved to Oakwood Heights, chasing that dream of a quieter life. Sarah, 37, was a fitness consultant working with a military base nearby, known for her expertise and charisma. Everyone seemed to know her name. Me? I'm Mike Thompson, 42, a civil engineer with nearly 2 decades of experience building structures that stand the test of time. We thought we'd found our slice of peace, a place to build a routine, maybe even a family. But then Derek Morrison entered the picture. At 38, Derek was a walking contradiction. By day, he was a local police officer, or so he claimed, and by night, he was the self-titled Neighborhood Safety President of our HOA. In those early days, he was the guy you wanted as a neighbor. When we first moved in, he helped me fix a busted water pipe without batting an eye. He and his wife, Linda, welcomed us with open arms, introducing us to the neighbors, calling us the model couple. We got invites to backyard barbecues where Derek would beam, showing us off like we were his personal success story. His police cruiser, parked in his driveway, gave the street this aura of safety, and folks would always say how lucky we were to have a cop living next door. It felt good, like we'd landed in a community where trust was the default. But then came the fence. We decided to swap out our rickety old wooden one for a sleek 6-foot wrought iron barrier. We did everything by the book, got the city permits, ran property surveys, even checked with the neighbors. Local ordinances said we could go up to 8 feet, so we were well within our rights. But the second our contractor started digging, Derek's whole vibe shifted. The friendly waves stopped. I'd catch him standing in his yard, arms crossed, staring at the construction like it was a personal insult. Linda started walking their dog past our house without so much as a glance our way. It was like a switch had flipped, and I couldn't figure out why. Then one evening, Derek showed up at our door, his police uniform shirt starched to perfection, but his tone was anything but neighborly. "Mike, you think about lowering that fence to 4 feet?" he asked, his voice carrying this edge, like he was giving an order, not making a request. "It's blocking my view of the street from my kitchen." I explained that Sarah needed privacy for her work-from-home calls, especially since some were sensitive. He nodded, but his smile was tight, forced. "As the HOA's rep, I think we need to prioritize community harmony over personal preferences," he said, dropping the HOA card like it was a trump card. Up until then, he'd never mentioned being part of the HOA, let alone having any real authority. I was thrown off. This was the guy who'd been all smiles, the one who'd made us feel at home. Now he was acting like we'd betrayed him. A week later, a letter arrived, official-looking, on fancy letterhead from a law firm, demanding we lower the fence or face $500 daily fines. It looked legit, with an embossed seal and all the right legal jargon. But when I called the law firm, the receptionist was clueless. No record of the case, no knowledge of the letter. It was a fake, plain and simple, and someone had gone to serious trouble to scare us. That same night, I noticed Sarah acting off. She was quieter than usual, stepping outside for hushed phone calls, speaking in this clipped, technical tone I couldn't quite place. She'd been a bit distant lately, but this was different, almost like she was on edge, guarding something. I didn't push, but the knot in my stomach told me something was wrong. Meanwhile, Derek was stirring the pot. He started whispering to neighbors, painting us as the bad guys, uncooperative, anti-community, you name it. The friendly nods from folks like Mrs. Patterson, who used to drop off homemade cookies, turned into cold shoulders. I found anonymous notes tucked under our windshield wipers, urging us to work with the community or calling us outsiders who didn't get how a good neighborhood runs. The handwriting was different each time, like Derek had rallied a small army to his cause. It wasn't just about the fence anymore. This was about control, about Derek flexing power he didn't even have. The tension kept building, and Sarah's distance grew. I'd catch her in the backyard, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a language I didn't understand, sharp, precise, almost military. Her posture was different too, rigid, like she was standing at attention. I started noticing things I hadn't before, the way she scanned every room we entered, always positioning herself near exits, always alert. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Sarah wasn't just a fitness consultant. There was something more to her, something she hadn't shared. Derek, meanwhile, was doubling down. He started holding neighborhood safety meetings, ranting about our fence like it was a threat to national security. One afternoon, he stood in front of our house with a crowd of neighbors, waving a sign that read, Neighborhood Security Chairman. He was in full performance mode, pointing at our fence and preaching about community standards. The Thompsons have chosen their own desires over our safety, he declared, his voice booming like he was addressing a courtroom. I watched Sarah from the window, her eyes scanning the crowd with a precision that gave me chills. She wasn't just listening, she was assessing, calculating, like she was trained for this. Then Derek dropped a bombshell. I've done some digging, he said, his voice thick with smugness. Sarah Thompson works at a classified military facility. Her job? Confidential. The crowd went quiet, eyes darting between us. For all we know, we're living next to someone who could be a threat to our safety. He was playing dirty, trying to turn the neighborhood against us, and it was working. I could see the doubt in their faces, the way they stepped back, unsure. This wasn't about a fence anymore. Derek was waging war, and he was using every trick in the book to make us the enemy. But he had no idea who he was really up against. Sarah wasn't just my wife, the fitness consultant with a knack for making people feel at ease. She was something else entirely, someone trained, someone dangerous. And Derek Morrison was about to learn that the hard way. The air in Oakwood Heights was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm you know is coming. Derek Morrison had turned our quiet neighborhood into his personal stage, and our 6-foot fence was the villain in his narrative. But what I didn't know then, what I was just starting to piece together, was that this wasn't just about Derek's ego or a petty HOA dispute. This was something much bigger, and it was about to unravel in ways I never could have predicted. Sarah, my wife, was changing right before my eyes. I'd always known her as the woman who could light up a room, the fitness consultant who had half the military base singing her praises. But lately, I was seeing a different side of her. I'd catch her in the backyard, pacing while on the phone, speaking in this clipped, coded language that sounded nothing like her usual self. Sometimes I'd see her freeze mid-step, her posture snapping into something rigid, almost military. It was the way she moved, deliberate, precise, like every step was calculated. I'd watch her scan rooms when we went out, always positioning herself near exits, her eyes flicking to every corner like she was expecting trouble. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but deep down, I knew there was more to it. Sarah was hiding something, and it was bigger than I could have imagined. Meanwhile, Derek was escalating his campaign against us. He'd taken to holding these so-called emergency HOA meetings right in front of our house, like he was staging a public trial. One Saturday, I looked out the window to see about 20 neighbors gathered on the street, with Derek front and center, holding a handmade sign that screamed "Neighborhood Security Chairman" in bold letters. He was in his element, pointing at our fence like it was a national threat. "This isn't just about aesthetics," he bellowed, his voice carrying that fake authority he loved to wield. "A fence this high blocks the street view. It could be hiding anything, suspicious activities, you name it. The Thompsons are putting our safety at risk." I glanced at Sarah, who was watching from the living room window. Her face was calm, but her eyes? They were locked on the crowd, moving from face to face, analyzing every person like she was building a mental map of the scene. Her body language wasn't that of the easygoing woman I'd married. It was someone trained, someone ready for a fight. I'd never seen her like this, and it sent a chill down my spine. Then Derek went for the jugular. "I've done my homework," he said, his voice dripping with self-righteous smugness. "Sarah Thompson works at a classified military facility, and her job description? It's marked confidential." The crowd went dead silent, their eyes darting between me and Sarah. You could feel the unease rippling through them. "For all we know," Derek continued, leaning into his fear-mongering, "we could be living next to people who pose a threat to national security." He let that hang in the air, watching as neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some even taking a step back. He wasn't just trying to isolate us, he was trying to make us the enemy, to turn the whole neighborhood against us. And for a moment, it looked like his plan was working. I felt my blood boil. This wasn't about a fence anymore. It was about control, about Derek's need to dominate. But what he didn't know was that he just poked a bear he couldn't handle. Sarah wasn't just some fitness consultant, and I was starting to realize she was way out of his league. A week later, things took a darker turn. Derek showed up at our door, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers, his face a mask of fake concern. "Mike, Sarah," he said, his voice all syrupy and insincere, "we've had reports of suspicious late-night activity on your property, possible weapon storage. We need to conduct a security inspection." The officers behind him looked uneasy, like they'd rather be anywhere else. But Derek? His eyes were gleaming, like he was savoring every second of this power trip. I could feel my heart pounding, but Sarah stepped forward, calm as ever. She was wearing her usual black athletic gear, but for the first time I noticed something I'd missed before, a small golden trident pinned to her collar. It wasn't just a decoration, it meant something big. My mind was racing, trying to place it, but I couldn't. All I knew was that Sarah wasn't fazed by Derek's theatrics. "I'm happy to cooperate," she said, her voice steady, almost eerily calm. "But first, I'd like to see your search warrant and the legal basis for this inspection." Derek's smug grin faltered just for a split second. but it was enough to show he wasn't as confident as he wanted us to think. "We don't need all that paperwork for a simple neighborhood check," he shot back, his tone sharper now. "I'm a police officer. I have the authority to investigate potential threats." Sarah didn't blink. Her posture straightened, and her voice took on this icy, professional edge. "Officer Morrison," she said, emphasizing his title like she was testing it. "Every law enforcement action requires proper documentation. I'm sure you're well aware of the importance of following legal procedures." The air between them crackled. Derek's face twisted, his hand hovering near his holster like he was trying to remind everyone who was in charge. "Don't lecture me about procedure," he snapped. "I've been keeping this neighborhood safe long before you showed up." But Sarah didn't back down. She stood there, tall and unshaken, like she'd faced down worse than Derek Morrison and come out on top. And that's when it hit me. Derek had no idea who he was dealing with. He thought he was intimidating a couple of regular homeowners, but Sarah was something else entirely, someone trained, someone who knew how to handle situations like this. His little power trip was about to crash and burn. That night, Sarah sat me down in the living room. The house was quiet, but the tension was suffocating. She looked at me, her eyes steady but intense, like she was about to drop a bomb. "Mike," she said, her voice low, "there's something I need to tell you about my job." My stomach dropped. I knew something was coming, but nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "I'm not just a fitness consultant," she continued, her gaze never leaving mine. "I'm Senior Chief Petty Officer Sarah Thompson, and I train Navy SEALs at the Naval Special Warfare Center." The words hit me like a freight train. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for years, wasn't just some fitness guru. She was a highly trained military officer with 18 years of service, 12 of them working with special operations. Her work was classified, which explained why she'd kept it from me. She'd been stationed here to develop training protocols for SEAL candidates, and everything about her job was need to know. As she spoke, I could hear the weight of her secret in her voice. This wasn't just a job, it was her life, one she'd kept hidden to protect me, to protect us. And suddenly, Derek's little investigation into her background made sense. He'd stumbled onto something he didn't understand, something way above his pay grade. He thought he could use it to scare us, but all he'd done was awaken a force he couldn't control. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Derek doesn't have clearance to access military records, but he knew I worked at a classified facility. That means he's either got connections or he's not who he says he is." Her words sent a chill through me. This wasn't just a neighborhood bully anymore. Derek was playing a dangerous game, and we were caught in the middle of it. But what he didn't know was that Sarah was already 10 steps ahead, and she was about to turn the tables in a way that would leave him regretting the day he ever pointed that gun at her. The revelation about Sarah's real job hit me like a tidal wave, reshaping everything I thought I knew about our life together. My wife wasn't just the fitness consultant I'd fallen in love with. She was Senior Chief Petty Officer Sarah Thompson, a Navy SEAL trainer with 18 years of military service, 12 of them in special operations. Her work at the Naval Special Warfare Center was classified, her life a web of secrets she'd kept to protect us. And now Derek Morrison, our self-styled neighborhood enforcer, had stumbled into her world, thinking he could bully us into submission. He had no idea the kind of fire he was playing with. Sarah's demeanor had shifted since that night she told me the truth. There was a focus in her eyes, a quiet intensity that made it clear she was done playing defense. "Mike," she said, her voice steady but edged with steel, "Derek's not just a nosy neighbor. He's digging into things he shouldn't, and I need to find out why." The way she said it, I knew she wasn't just talking about a hunch. This was the trained professional in her taking over, and I was about to see what she was really capable of. Using skills I didn't even know she had, Sarah launched her own investigation into Derek. She tapped into databases I'd never heard of, made calls to contacts whose names she didn't share, and started piecing together Derek's life with a precision that left me speechless. She worked late into the night, her laptop screen glowing with files and records, her fingers flying across the keyboard like she was conducting a symphony. I'd catch glimpses of her analyzing patterns, cross-referencing data, moving with the kind of focus you only see in someone who's been trained for high-stakes missions. It was like watching a different person, one I was proud to call my wife, but also one I barely recognized. What she uncovered was jaw-dropping. Derek Morrison wasn't even his real name. His real name was Derek Mitchell, a former private security guard with a rap sheet longer than our driveway. He'd been fired from 3 different security firms in Arizona for abuse of authority and fabricating incident reports. After getting sued by 2 families for harassment, he'd fled to California, setting up shop in Oakwood Heights. The kicker? He wasn't a police officer, not even close. The uniform, the cruiser parked in his driveway, the badge he flashed so proudly, it was all a lie, bought online or cobbled together to fuel his power trip. Sarah dug deeper and found a pattern. Derek had pulled this stunt in other neighborhoods before. He'd pose as a cop, intimidate residents into selling their homes at rock-bottom prices, then scoop up the properties through shell companies and flip them for massive profits. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a full-blown real estate fraud scheme, and Oakwood Heights was his latest playground. That neighborhood safety president title he loved to throw around, completely made up. Sarah checked with the county clerk's office and found out the real HOA board hadn't met in over 2 years. Derek had been running his own show, operating outside any legitimate authority, and he'd fooled everyone. In just 48 hours, Sarah had unraveled Derek's entire operation, his fake identity, his criminal history, the works. She was ready to take it to the real police, to blow the lid off his scam. But just as we were preparing to act, something threw us for a loop. Derek found out we were onto him. I don't know how, maybe a slip-up, maybe someone we trusted was feeding him info, but he showed up at our door the next morning with 3 actual police officers in tow. His smirk was as smug as ever, like he'd already won the game. "Mike, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I'm sorry to do this, but I've reported you for creating false evidence and trying to defame a law enforcement officer." He leaned in, his eyes gleaming with that same glee I'd seen when he held the gun to Sarah's head. Accusing a cop of misconduct is serious business, and any so-called evidence you've got is tainted. The officers behind him looked uneasy, shifting their weight like they weren't sure why they were there. It was clear Derek was pulling strings, trying to flip the script and paint us as the bad guys. He thought he could bury us with his lies, discredit everything Sarah had uncovered. But he didn't count on what happened next. That afternoon, Linda, Derek's wife, showed up at our door. She looked nervous, her hands twisting together, her eyes darting like she was afraid someone was watching. "I can't keep quiet anymore," she whispered, barely loud enough for us to hear. "Derek's not a real police officer. We moved here after he was fired from a security company in Phoenix for pretending to be a cop. He's been doing this for years, buying fake badges, uniforms, everything." Her words hit like a thunderbolt. Linda, the quiet wife who'd always seemed so meek, was spilling the beans. She said she had proof, receipts for Derek's fake police gear, his real employment records, even emails that could tie him to his past scams. It was a gold mine, and for a moment I thought we'd hit the jackpot. Linda seemed genuinely scared, like she was risking everything to come clean. But Sarah's face didn't change. She just nodded, thanked Linda, and promised to keep her safe if she helped us. As Linda left, I turned to Sarah, my mind racing. This is it, right? We've got him. But Sarah's expression was unreadable. Maybe, she said, her voice low. But something's not right. She came to us too easily. I didn't get it at first, but Sarah's instincts were screaming that this was too convenient. Linda's confession felt like a chess move, and we were about to find out just how deep Derek's game went. That night, Sarah pulled up more records, cross-checking Linda's story. She found inconsistencies, dates that didn't line up, records that seemed too clean. It was like Linda had handed us a script, not the truth. Sarah's training kicked into overdrive. "Mike," she said, her eyes narrowing, "this isn't just Derek. There's someone else pulling strings, and Linda's part of it." I felt my stomach drop. We weren't just fighting a fake cop. We were up against a machine, one that was watching our every move. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was darker than I could have imagined. Derek Morrison, or rather Derek Mitchell, wasn't just a neighborhood bully with a fake badge. He was running a sophisticated real estate fraud scheme, targeting communities like ours to intimidate residents, force them out, and profit off their homes. But the real gut punch came when I overheard something that turned everything upside down. I was in the garage, tinkering with some tools, when I caught Linda, Derek's wife, on the phone in their backyard. Her voice was low but clear enough for me to hear every word. "They bought it, Derek," she said, a hint of smugness in her tone. "Sarah even shared their plan to gather evidence this weekend. You were right. Playing the victim wife was the perfect move." My heart sank. Linda's tearful confession, the one where she'd spilled the beans about Derek's fake cop act, wasn't real. It was a setup, a calculated play to keep us off balance, to feed us just enough to think we were winning while they stayed one step ahead. Linda wasn't the scared, remorseful wife. She was in on it, playing her part like an Oscar-worthy actress. I bolted inside to tell Sarah, my pulse racing. "We've been played," I said, barely able to get the words out. "Linda's not a whistleblower. She's working with Derek. I heard her on the phone. They know we're investigating, and they're setting us up." I expected Sarah to be shocked, but she just nodded, her face calm, but her eyes burning with that same intensity I'd seen before. "I had a feeling," she said, her voice steady. Her story was too clean, too convenient. "We need to switch gears, Mike. This isn't a game we're playing anymore. It's a war." Sarah's training kicked into high gear. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was Senior Chief Petty Officer Sarah Thompson, a Navy SEAL trainer who'd faced down threats most people couldn't even imagine. "We're going to use tools Derek doesn't even know exist," she said, her words carrying a weight that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I trusted her. She was already 3 steps ahead, and I was just trying to keep up. Sarah reached out to Captain James Rodriguez again, her old teammate from the Naval Special Warfare Command, now with the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Task Force. She laid out everything: Derek's fake identity, his fraud scheme, Linda's double cross. Rodriguez's voice was grim over the speakerphone. "This guy's not just a small-time crook," he said. "Derek Mitchell's got a history. 4 arrests for impersonating an officer, harassing civilians, the works. He's been hopping states, pulling the same scam. But if Linda's in on it, you're dealing with a network, not just one guy." Rodriguez agreed to provide covert support, but Sarah wasn't waiting for backup. She turned our home into a command center, installing surveillance equipment that was so high-tech I didn't even know where to look for it. Tiny cameras, hidden microphones, motion sensors, all invisible to the naked eye but capturing every move Derek and Linda made. She worked with a precision that left me in awe, setting up feeds to monitor their conversations, their comings and goings, even their late-night phone calls. It was like something out of a spy movie, but this was real, and my wife was running the show. The breakthrough came late one night when one of Sarah's audio feeds picked up a call between Derek and an unknown contact. The conversation was chilling. "This neighborhood's got too many educated types asking questions," Derek said, his voice tense. "We need to push out at least 3 or 4 more families to lock down the HOA board. Once we do, we can raise the fees to $2,000 a month, like we planned. The Thompsons are just the start of something bigger." My stomach churned as I listened. This wasn't just about us or our fence. Derek was orchestrating a takeover, a scheme to control the entire neighborhood and bleed it dry. Sarah's investigation revealed the full scope of his operation. Derek wasn't just targeting random families. He was going after specific ones, people with ties to the military or national security. Our neighborhood, Oakwood Heights, was a gold mine for him. 3 families linked to Naval Special Warfare Command, 2 defense engineers, and a retired Air Force intelligence officer. It wasn't random. Sarah's voice was steady as she laid it out for me. "This is a coordinated attack, Mike," she said, showing me files Rodriguez had helped her pull. "He's targeting military families and defense contractors, trying to destabilize communities with ties to national security. We're not just fighting a fake cop, we're up against an organized criminal enterprise." The realization hit me like a punch. Derek's scheme wasn't just about real estate profits. He was systematically targeting people like us, people with connections to America's defense infrastructure. Our fence, our move to Oakwood Heights, it had put a square in his crosshairs. But Sarah wasn't backing down. She was building a case, piece by piece, with evidence that could bury Derek and his entire network. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of Sarah's cameras caught Linda meeting with a man we didn't recognize, someone who didn't live in Oakwood Heights. They were in a parked car down the street speaking in hushed tones. Sarah enhanced the audio, and what we heard confirmed our worst fears. "The Thompsons are getting too close," the man said. "We need to move up the timeline, get the board under control before they blow this wide open." Linda nodded, her face hard. "Derek's already working on discrediting them. We'll make sure their evidence doesn't see the light of day." Sarah turned to me, her jaw tight. "They're not just after us," she said. "They're after everyone like us. This is bigger than Oakwood Heights." She was right. Derek and Linda were part of something far-reaching, a network that stretched beyond our little neighborhood. Sarah sent the recordings to Rodriguez, who confirmed the man in the car was a known associate of a larger fraud ring operating across 6 states. This wasn't just a local scam. It was a multi-state operation, and we were caught in the middle. But just as we were closing in, Derek made his next move. He showed up at our door again, this time with 2 police officers, his face a mask of fake concern. "Mike, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with crocodile tears, "we've had more reports of suspicious activity on your property. I'm afraid we need to conduct another inspection." The officers looked uncomfortable, like they knew something was off but couldn't quite place it. Derek, though, was in his element, playing the role of the dutiful cop to perfection. Sarah stepped forward, her posture straight, her eyes locked on Derek's. "Officer Mitchell," she said, deliberately using his real name, "I'll need to see your search warrant and the legal grounds for this inspection." The air went still. Derek's face twitched, his confidence cracking for just a moment. He hadn't expected her to call him out like that, to use his real name in front of the officers. "We don't need paperwork for a routine check," he snapped, but his voice was shakier now, less certain. Sarah didn't flinch. "Every law enforcement action requires documentation," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "I'm sure you understand the importance of procedure." Derek's hand hovered near his holster, a subtle threat, but Sarah's eyes never left his. The tension was electric, and I could see the officers glancing at each other, unsure of what they'd walked into. That's when I knew Derek had made a fatal mistake. He thought he could intimidate Sarah, but he was out of his depth. She wasn't just a homeowner standing up to a bully. She was a trained operative, someone who'd faced down real threats. And Derek? He was about to learn what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong person. The standoff on our front porch felt like it lasted an eternity, though it was probably just a few seconds. Derek Mitchell stood there, his hand twitching near his fake police holster, his eyes locked on Sarah's, trying to stare her down. The two real officers behind him looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, their faces a mix of confusion and unease. Derek, though, was all in, playing the role of the righteous cop with a smugness that made my blood boil. "Mike, Sarah," he said, his voice oozing fake concern, "we've got reports of suspicious activity on your property again. We need to do a security inspection. Just protocol, you understand?" Sarah didn't budge. She stood tall, her black athletic gear hugging her frame, that golden trident insignia on her collar catching the sunlight. Her voice was calm, but there was a razor-sharp edge to it. "Officer Mitchell," she said, hitting his real name again like a jab, "I'm happy to cooperate, but I'll need to see your search warrant and the legal basis for this inspection." The air went still. Derek's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as he realized Sarah wasn't backing down. The officers behind him exchanged glances, clearly picking up on the tension, but unsure what to make of it. "We don't need paperwork for a routine neighborhood check," Derek snapped, his voice losing its polish, a hint of desperation creeping in. He leaned forward, trying to intimidate her, his hand brushing the grip of his weapon. Big mistake. Sarah's eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face, and I saw something shift in her, a switch flipping, like a predator sizing up prey. "Every law enforcement action requires proper documentation," she said, her tone so steady it was almost unnerving. "I'm sure you're familiar with procedure, Officer Mitchell." The way she said his name again, it was like a challenge, a warning. Derek's face reddened, his composure cracking. "Don't lecture me about procedure," he spat, stepping closer, his hand still hovering near his holster. "I've been keeping this neighborhood safe long before you rolled in." The crowd of neighbors watching from across the street went quiet, sensing the escalation. I could feel my heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists. This was it, the moment everything was going to explode. And then Sarah moved. In less than 3 seconds, she closed the gap between them, her movement so fluid and precise it was like watching a choreographed dance. Before Derek could react, she had his arm twisted behind his back, his fake badge clattering to the ground. She disarmed him with a flick of her wrist, his gun now in her hand, pointed safely away. The officers froze, stunned, as Derek hit the porch face first, Sarah's knee pinning him down. She zip-tied his hands behind his back with a speed that left everyone speechless. "Derek Mitchell," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "You're under citizen's arrest for impersonating a police officer, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it." The crowd gasped, murmurs rippling through the neighbors. Someone had their phone out, live streaming the whole thing, and I could already imagine the comments flooding in online. The officers, finally snapping out of their shock, moved forward, but they weren't sure who to restrain, Sarah or Derek. That's when Captain James Rodriguez arrived, his FBI badge gleaming as he stepped out of an unmarked car with 2 other agents. "Stand down," he called to the officers, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Senior Chief Thompson has this under control." Rodriguez walked over, giving Sarah a nod of respect. "Outstanding work, Senior Chief," he said, as his team moved to take Derek into custody. The officers, now fully aware they'd been dragged into Derek's charade, stepped back, looking embarrassed. Derek, still on the ground, twisted his head to glare at Sarah. "You think this is over?" he sneered, even as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. "You have no idea how deep this goes. You were targeted long before you moved here. There are people who want military families like yours gone, and they'll find another way." Sarah's face didn't change, but I could see the steel in her eyes. She knew this wasn't just about Derek. His words confirmed what she'd suspected. This was part of a larger network, something far beyond our little neighborhood. As the police led Derek to a patrol car, the crowd erupted into whispers, some neighbors clapping, others still processing what they'd just seen. The live stream was blowing up online with comments praising Sarah's composure and courage. "Who is this woman?" one viewer wrote. "She's a badass," another added. Within hours, the video had thousands of views, and Oakwood Heights was trending. Rodriguez filled us in later that day. Derek's arrest was just the beginning. The evidence Sarah had gathered, recordings, documents, surveillance footage, was enough to crack open a multi-state investigation. Derek and Linda were part of a criminal ring targeting military families and defense contractors, forcing them out of strategic neighborhoods to destabilize communities tied to national security. The FBI had been tracking the operation for months, but Sarah's work gave them the breakthrough they needed. Within weeks, 23 operatives were arrested across 6 states, charged with fraud, impersonation, and conspiracy. The financial damage they'd caused ran into the millions. Derek faced 7 federal charges, including impersonating a federal officer and racketeering. Linda, who'd played the victim so convincingly, was also arrested, her role in the scheme exposed by Sarah's recordings. The investigation uncovered a trail of fake badges, forged documents, and shell companies, all tied to the real estate fraud empire. Oakwood Heights wasn't their first target, but thanks to Sarah, it was their last. The aftermath was transformative. Sarah's actions didn't just take down a criminal, she changed our community. The HOA, once a ghost organization under Derek's fake reign, was restructured with transparency and accountability. Neighbors who'd been divided by Derek's lies came together, holding meetings to rebuild trust. Margaret Williams, a retired teacher who'd once avoided us, nominated Sarah for HOA president. Sarah, true to form, declined with a smile. "Leadership isn't about power," she told the crowd. "It's about empowering others to protect what matters." 6 months later, Oakwood Heights held its first Unity Day, a celebration of community with barbecues, kids' games, and a presentation on neighborhood safety. The playground, once a place where kids were too scared to play, under Derek's intimidation, was alive with laughter. I stood in our backyard, looking at that 6-foot wrought iron fence that had started it all. It wasn't just a fence anymore, it was a symbol of standing your ground, of fighting for what's right. Sarah got a commendation from the Naval Special Warfare Command for her role in exposing a domestic threat. Her name was in headlines, and the case even sparked new legislation, the Derek Mitchell Act, to crack down on impersonation scams and protect communities from fraud. But for Sarah, it wasn't about the recognition. "Sometimes you have to speak the truth," she told me one night, watching the kids play under the new community sign. A community protected by truth and unity, not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't. I looked at her, the woman I thought I knew, now revealed as a hero in every sense. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Letting the world know who you really are?" She smiled, her eyes softening. "Some secrets are worth keeping," she said. But when it comes to protecting the people you love, the truth is the only weapon you need. Derek thought he could control us with fear, but he picked the wrong family. Sarah wasn't just a Navy SEAL trainer, she was a force of justice, and he never stood a chance. Our fight wasn't just about a fence or a fake cop. It was about standing up to lies, to power, to anyone who thinks they can bully their way to control. And in the end, we didn't just win, we changed everything.